Discovery research is absolutely critical for medicine and for mental health, which is our primary research interests. There's so much that has come to us through serendipity in terms of how we treat psychiatric disorders, and if we can start to better understand the mechanisms through which the brain responds to treatment, we can start to target that to the individual, and I think our outcomes could be so much more successful for each and every patient. My research is really focused on discovery science, so our overarching questions are really about how stress impacts the brain and how it affects people's responses under stress and when they're suffering mental illness like depression. But there's so much that we don't know about that. So we're really interested in understanding the basic mechanisms and things that currently we know we don't know because the treatments aren't working as well as they should. So we've looked at how antidepressants affect the brain when it's been through an experience of stress or exposed to stress hormones. We know that antidepressants affect the brain's recovery and help the brain to repair itself after it's been exposed to a stressful event. We have found that in some individuals, when they've been exposed to continuous stress or even just stress hormones, that the brain doesn't respond in the same way. And so we're focusing now on a metabolic mechanism, something that really we weren't aware of just even a couple of years ago as being a critical moderator of treatment response. And so we think there's a lot of potential, having made this discovery, to target it and help patients to recover from depression. Our research uses multiple different approaches to try to better understand the mechanisms involved in psychiatric illness as well as treatment response. So we use animal studies, basic animal studies, using mice and rats to understand how the brain responds under stress, how currently available treatments and emerging treatments modify the brain and to produce a recovery and normalise behaviour. In these animals, we use a number of different approaches, including deep brain stimulation, optogenetic stimulation, and we're also using a number of molecular approaches and viral gene transfer approaches to try to better understand those mechanisms and look at new and emerging therapies. We also work closely with clinical teams, and so we're taking those discoveries that we make in the basic animal models to the clinic and confirming that what we're observing in small animals is actually playing out in the clinic in terms of the patients that are responsive and non-responsive. So in these individuals, we're looking at their peripheral blood cells, looking at the molecular mechanisms of drug activation and response there, and then correlating that with their clinical response. And we're now moving on to having overlapping behavioural and neuroimaging paradigms across the basic research that we're doing here at the Queensland Brain Institute and that which is occurring in the clinics. In the field of psychiatric medicine, patients come into treatment to receive treatment, and they're currently essentially following a series of sequential treatment approaches. And so for a number of these patients, they just don't respond, and so only 30% typically respond to the first treatment that they're given. These treatments can take months to trial before they even know if they're going to be effective. And so if we can start to individualise this treatment for these patients based on how their own individual cells respond to the medicine, we can shortcut this trial and error approach, potentially save months or even years of unsuccessful treatment for these patients and help them to get on the path to healthy recovery. And I believe it also will help to destigmatise mental illness if we can understand the biological mechanisms involved in recovery. We absolutely believe that this approach can be used to individualise treatments for patients with depression if we can look at the cellular level of how their cells are responding to antidepressants to see if at the metabolic level they're not able to mount an appropriate repair defence and recovery response, we can look at augmenting this for those individual patients. And so we think this is a factor why some patients don't respond, and we know that there are available treatments that can help these patients that are currently being used for other disorders. And so we absolutely hope that we can use this to individualise treatment and improve outcomes. So these approaches, I think, are very important because not only can they help us to individualise treatment, they can also help us to develop and improve on emerging treatments such as deep brain stimulation and other emerging therapies for psychiatric disorders. And so when we understand these mechanisms through which the brain is repairing itself, we can help the most severely treatment refractory patients to respond and potentially fast track that response for them as well. I firmly believe and truly do hope that we're able to understand the mechanisms of treatment resistance and response, and firstly help to individualise that treatment and then develop new treatments that can fast track recovery for patients who currently don't have many, if any, available options and may have gone through years of treatment trials that have been ineffective. And I think ultimately, I hope that we'll give people hope that we're on the path to finding these mechanisms and finding treatments where currently none seem to be available. I think it's only a matter of time as we understand the mechanisms and discover these mechanisms at a very basic level that we can start to bring in new and novel approaches to treat them.